Welcome to the second day of the Board of Psychology meeting here at Berkeley, California. And I would like to, I don't know if he's in the room, I don't think he is. I'd actually like to extend my thanks to the Wright Institute and Dr. Newman for graciously granting us the opportunity to meet here. It's always such a pleasant space to work in, and great environment. So, could you take the roll, please?
Akwe-Badu. Bernal.
Aye.
Kasuga.
Aye.
Erickson. Here. Fu.
Here.
Horn.
Here.
Jones.
Present.
Phillips. Phillips.
Oh, sorry, present.
Thank you. All attended.
I didn't hear it. My thoughts were too loud. So we're going to go back to item number 12, which is the Continuing Education and Renewals Report. Mr. Cochran.
Hi.
Hi.
Good morning. Okay, so for the Continuing Education Renewals Report, I added 3 new statistics that were requested in the last board meeting, which was the online versus mailed-in renewals, the pass and fail rate for the past 3 fiscal years, and the pass and fail rate for second audits. So attachment A is the psychologist and psychological assistant renewal applications processed. So for that, an average of 720 psychologist renewal applications were processed in the past 8 months, with an average of 615 renewing as active and 104 renewing as inactive. Additionally, an average of 68 psychological assistance applications were processed each month.
So when you saying, sorry, an average of 720 psychologist renewal applications, you're talking about per month?
Per month, yeah.
Okay.
And then attachment B is the citations issued. So with the assistance of Lavinia Snyder and the licensing unit, I've issued 65 citations between May 27th and August 25th. A majority of those, about 70%, were issued because they were insufficient total hours. And of the 65, 31 citations are closed and satisfied. So they've completed the order of abatement and paid their fine.
So I have another question then. So, and I know y'all tell me this every time, and I just keep forgetting. So they have a certain period of time after they're sent a letter that you're deficient or whatever, and that's a month? How long?
30 days.
30
yes.
days, okay. And then what happens if they go past the 30 days?
So then I send them another notice saying it's still, we haven't received the order of abatement or fine, and they get 3 notices
Okay.
before.
Each with a month to respond?
Yeah.
And then after the 3rd notice, if they don't respond?
We send them to get FTB letters, and FTB is, I'm not too familiar. Yeah, Franchise Tax Board. So they'll get a lien or on their taxes, they'll have to it'll come to us. I believe that's how it works.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
After the 3rd notice, they'll go to they'll have an FTB letter, and that's the Franchise Tax Board.
So if we have a licensee who does not comply with the citation and fine, we can put a hold on their license. We can also send them to the Franchise Tax Board. It's called the Intercept Program. And through that program, we can basically work with the Franchise Tax Board to put a lien on the licensee's tax return. We may not get that fee reimbursed to us for several years, but that's why we put a hold on the license. So at the next renewal period, they will have to pay that cite and fine fee before they can renew.
So, but they're not renewed, are they? Or they have been renewed, and, because all the audits are done post-renewal.
Correct.
Yeah, so, okay.
So it could take up to
then the next time they won't get
correct.
to
It could take
renew.
up to 2 years
Yeah.
for us to recover the fine amount at the next
Yeah.
renewal period. But if they choose not to renew, then we'll actually get that reimbursement. It could be several years through the Franchise Tax Board Intercept Program.
Okay.
And if they were not to pay the fine at all, they would not get renewed.
That's correct.
What about the missing units that were not, or the courses that were not completed? What's the remedy for that? Maybe it was already stated, but they have to pay the fine, but what if they never complete the courses?
There would still be a hold on their license, and they wouldn't be able to renew until that's completed.
So they have to pay the money and complete the courses before they can, thank you.
Correct. Okay, and so attachment C is the online versus mailed-in renewals. That's from January 2017 to August 2017. And an average of 334 psychologists renew online per month, and an average of 380 psychologists mail in their renewals per month.
Are there any explanations for why? I know August was an incomplete month. There was about 7 days missing, but it seemed like the mail-in rate drop was significantly lower than other months. Is there a particular month about August that drives the higher online registration, or?
No, I think it's also just because the data wasn't yet all the way completed through that month, so. And then attachment D, the pass and fail rate for the past 3 fiscal years. In 2014, there was a 90% pass rate. In 2015, it's 85%. And in 2016, it's 81%. So,
It's trending in the wrong direction.
and then the pass and fail rate for second audits for 2016, that's for psychologists who failed the first time and they are audited a second time. It's 68% passing rate. The number one reason is they already used those hours from the previous cycle.
So in other words, the hours they used to abate the prior deficiency, they're trying to count again for continuing education,
Correct.
and that's not permissible.
No.
And we're explicit about the fact that's not permissible.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
So. And then the rest is just the same as the last board meeting. The audit's done from January 2016 to April 2016. For attachments F, and G.
I think I speak on behalf of maybe more than myself when I say it's pretty startling to see the failure rate on the continuing education audits. It's a little disheartening to see that people feel like they can kind of get by, or I don't know what the reasoning is. So I shouldn't assume that that's what it is, but that people are not accurately complying with the requirement for the hours.
Right.
I guess that's all I have to say on that subject.
Yeah. So, any other questions? No? Okay, thank you. Oh.
Oh, no, I was along the line. When they don't pass, do they inquire what they might be able to do to help them to pass or study, or do?
Yeah, and I recommend maybe, we do have like a chart that they can keep keep record of their CEs. And we can send that over to them. And it's also on our website, that record.
Not passing doesn't mean you didn't pass a course, it
Yeah.
means you didn't get all your hours.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is there a way that, okay, so we reach out to them in those kinds of ways?
Yeah.
Question here?
I just also wanted to mention that the California Psychological Association provides a service where they can also pay to have their hours tracked if they're unable to do that on their own.
The question came up yesterday of whether the old system was better in some way when we had everyone list the courses and the hours, and we didn't do the audits. I'm trying to frame in my mind what would we need to know is what makes it better or not better. Did we know how many people failed before? what percentage. We have a high percentage now that don't pass the audits.
Actually, I think it was about 10 to 12, 7 to 12%. I'm remembering those numbers, so it was definitely lower. And that was when MCEP was doing it?
Yes,
And that
right.
was, like, that was 100% audit. Right?
I think that's, yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that was before my time as a member of the board. But in terms of the staffing and the cost related to that, was there, I don't know what MCEP, and was there a cost or was there, because I know when we discussed it yesterday, it sounded like there would be the review of staff or some way to do it in terms of the timing to then be able to respond to a licensee and say the process is completed. So,
Now, MCEP was an agency that was actually part of the California Psychological Association, and people would send their certificates in, if I recall, because I was in that system, send the certificates in, they would be recorded, and then you would get a report back that showed whether you'd satisfied your requirements or not, what your deficiencies were, and then ultimately you reported directly to the board the number of hours, correct? Yeah, come on up.
And who paid for them?
exactly, that's not my
Licensees.
Licensees, but, okay.
Press the.
Is it on? Hi, Dr. Joe Lindercrow. I'm the CEO at the California Psychological Association. The MCEP accrediting agency was a function of the Board of Psychology that was managed by the California Psychological Association. And we had a pretty complex software setup that we used. We had 2 full-time staff members who, and a third person at an administrative managerial level. And we managed all of that function during the time that the board did 100% audit. So we were the ones who, you're right, people sent all of their certificates in to CPA. We kept track of all of that, and we reported to the Board of Psychology. We still have all of that in place, except for the staff. We still have all the mechanism there. The determination was, and I'm not sure that I fully understand why the board decided to take that back in-house. The program more than paid for itself. Psychologists paid a $35 fee when they submitted their certificates. The program more than paid for itself, and it was 100% audit. So I don't know how the comparison is now if you're really losing people who just aren't meeting their requirements. What the MCEP staff did was send reminders to people about their CE requirements, reminders about when their license was going to be renewed, kept track of everything, sent all of that to the board, and then were able to give a transcript to any psychologist that needed that for any other reason. So that's how the program worked. And when was it that the Board of Psychology took it back? 4 years ago?
I believe 2013.
13?
I think they took it back in beginning of 2013.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, because I came in at the end of 13.
Right. And then we had a bit of a transition period where we were sort of educating psychologists about it. I mean, I do think that when there was a 100% audit, and the reasoning of the board at the time, as I recall, was that this was bringing the Board of Psychology in line with other licensed professionals. I think psychologists were the only ones that had the 100% audit. So the upside was that it was 100% audit, and everyone had to meet the requirements. And I think probably if you look back, I wouldn't be surprised to see that the failure rate was a lot less then, of course. So the board's rationale at the time, as I recall, as I said, was that it was bringing it into line and that a random audit was going to be sufficient to manage this in the way the board wanted to.
The advantage of the other system and I'm not necessarily advocating for one or the other, one of the advantages of the other system was that in order to get renewed, you had to prove that you had the hours.
Yes.
So it stopped the person at that point, as opposed to being 2 years out, they may not be able to renew their license. And I guess the thing I think about is we've kind of said, let's put us all office licensed psychologists on the honor system. So it's disheartening to see that people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Well, we do have a program called the CE Bank, where psychologists can pay a very modest fee, and we keep track of their CE credits for them. And anytime they are audited, they can request a transcript from us. But of course, not everybody participates in that program. And I think that psychologists now know that it's a 10% audit, and if you're not auditing 10% at least, then I don't know the reasons. We deal with a lot of phone calls when people are audited, and I think the fact that you get your license renewed and then sort of have to catch
Receive the
up.
audit.
Right. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it gives people a bit of a reason to think that they're not, I mean, it's a 10% audit. And is it 10% or is it less than 10%? 10%. Are you doing 10? Yeah, so, but.
Dr. Phillips, can I suggest that we put this on a agenda item for a future, because it's a larger conversation. I think
Yeah,
there
I
could be
think
some
that's a good idea.
opportunity to gather data. But I also want to say, Ms. Sorick, it sounds like this might be a good addition to that CPS kind of work in terms of Paperlight. Because I do recall during licensing several months ago, we talked about the whole idea of the functionality of Breeze to upload information and stuff. So I think there's an opportunity for board staff to look at things in a little bit more detail and bring it back for us to have a more robust conversation. Because I do think that it would be
Right.
great historical information.
And
This
I
is
think that,
helpful.
well, and I think that we gave the board staff all of the information we had. We had a system, a software system we purchased a software system when we were managing the program, and it was completely paperless. We were completely paperless. Everything was scanned and uploaded into this system. We still have that. We're using it for the CE Bank. But we were able to create a paperless system, so everything was electronic and easily managed. And if there's, I think we handed over everything that we had regarding statistics and so forth, but if there's anything that we can do, if you want to try and look at this again, to do comparisons, we're happy to help with that.
Thank you.
Okay?
I think you're correct. We should table this discussion. This is a larger discussion. Perhaps we can put it on a future agenda. And now we'll go back to Ms. McCorkle.
Oh, and that was just the conclusion of my presentation.
Are there any further questions or comments from the board? From the public as to her report? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for your patience and not being able to do that yesterday. Okay, so we are now moving on to Ms. Jones and the legislative update on behalf of the Policy and Advocacy Committee.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Phillips. Mr. Glass-Steagall will be assisting in presenting information for the Policy and Advocacy Committee. Both myself and Dr. Erickson currently serve on that committee. So, Dr. Erickson, if I miss anything, please interrupt me. And as just a start, I know that we have like a 2.5-page agenda. This is going to not be that long. So, Mr. Glass-Steagall, please interrupt me too if I'm saying something that gets me back on course. I would appreciate that. So let's turn to tab number 16. Just as customary, the board matrix. I love it. We love it. Thank you. Mr. Glass-Steagall, and as you can see, this is a comprehensive listing of the bills that staff is tracking, giving us the information on the status, location, and a brief summary, and so this is super helpful. This is obviously in the order of assembly bills, the numerical order, and then the Senate bills, but this is a really great resource, and so we appreciate you continuing to do this.
My pleasure.
Moving to 16A is information for informational purposes on AB 89. There has been some activity since our last meeting.
There
So
has.
please share, Mr. Glassbeagle.
Absolutely. AB 89, which is the board's suicide assessment intervention bill, was signed into law on September 1st. It becomes effective 2020. That is the only updates I have.
And you might recall, even though we had said that, you know, the first part of the meeting was items that weren't on the agenda, we did have some public comment about this yesterday. Dr. Erickson, is there anything you want to add? I know that you and I have never done our commitment for the newsletter, which I take full responsibility for. But that is something we've not done, and so I know we have until 2020 for it to be effective. The newsletter. So I will, we have some time, but I know that there was some discussion at one point to do an article about the actual legislation, and I think could be some opportunity in terms of the implementation of it with staff's heavy involvement.
Very soon, staff will do an advisory that will go out to all licensees and interested public that will let them know of the requirements and how to satisfy the requirement. It'll go into a lot of detail about when you can do the courses and how you can do it and what you can submit, and it'll be hopefully very helpful to anybody that's looking to try to meet that requirement now or in the future. So that should be going out within, I would say, the next month.
Right. So that means that would help guide me, Dr. Erickson and I, to
Absolutely.
do the commitment we have agreed to do. Is there any board comment?
There is actually. I just wanted to mention for the benefit of licensees, current licensees, or people that are expecting to get licensed, that if they are anxious about committing this requirement before the requirement actually goes into effect, and they've decided to take a continuing education course in order to satisfy the requirement, that the continuing education course needs to be 6 hours long, and it needs to be by an approved continuing education provider. Just going to a workshop that's not continuing education is going to be a much more difficult way to satisfy the requirement if it satisfies it at all.
And while that's helpful, I think that would be included in the advisory, because I know that part of that conversation was how to document it and all that. So we don't want to muddy the water at this
Well,
point.
the reason I say this is we're getting a lot of telephone calls and about continuing education courses, so we thought we'd get that information out a little prematurely.
So I do think that would be very important for us to do the advisory through the normal channels and then use our social media, because I do know that people are interested in that. But I know that there was that conversation before about how it would be documented. So while we won't be able to go through all that discussion now in terms of documentation, I think that advisory piece hopefully will be structured toward some of that. And so it would be helpful to perhaps, once that gets crafted, maybe we could share with the Policy and Advocacy Committee, just to think about some of the questions we've heard in committee meetings, and you could definitely weigh on that, because I think it would be helpful, because I know that was a big question from people.
And we might write the newsletter article maybe from a different slant, but
Yes.
including the same information the advisory has, maybe some additional FAQs that would be helpful.
Is there any other board comment about AB 89? Ms. Sork, were you going to say something?
Just quickly to add on to Dr. Phillips' statement about people that are planning on taking any courses now. It is a 6-hour requirement. Dr. Winckelmann and I were talking in the lobby about just, how that can be divided. And it doesn't necessarily need to be one course. It could be more than one course. It could be distance. It could be online. So if you are planning as a licensee to meet the requirement now by taking a course, you can do that, and then there'll be additional information in the advisory.
And I do think that Dr. Erickson's point too, it would be good to the advisory and the FAQ, because that was that question about those specific questions, and maybe we could take some of the calls that we're getting to create the FAQs, because the issue of documentation came up a lot of times.
Which could be our article.
That's exactly.
And I just kind of wanted to remind, for the CE courses, they need to be accepted by either CPA, APA, the California Medical Education, or the California Medical Association, just so that when you're looking for CE courses, you know that they have to be approved by at least one of those agencies.
Thank you. Ms. Sparks, did we miss something? Just wasn't sure. Any public comment about that first item, AB 89? Seeing none, we'll move to section B. So that's the tab 16B. And in this section, oh, wait a second. Yes, section B. The first, these 2, 4, 6 bills are bills where the board took a position on, and there's no request for action at this time, but these are bills that we're getting just a status update. So why don't we walk through each one of them? AB 244 is the first one, Mr. Glass-Steagall.
Absolutely. AB 244 is a maternal mental health bill. The board requested changes to the language and expansion of the definitions in there, and we have sent an email to the author's office to advise of the changes that we requested to be made, and also to let them know of our interest in being a stakeholder in this bill for when they do begin pursuit of the bill again in the next legislative year.
Any comments from board on this section? I mean, on this bill, AB 244? The next item is AB 1456.
AB 1456 is the exempt settings bill, which changes the remainder of the exempt settings that were at 3 years to 5 years. So now every exempt setting that the board, that is allowed to work without a license is at 5 years. This bill was signed on July 31st. It became effective immediately, and the staff is currently working on a advisory to go out to the licensees and interested public. AB 1188 is the mental health practitioner's loan repayment bill, which changes the amount paid by every licensee of the Board of Psychology, licensed psychologist, from $10 to $20 at every renewal. And this bill was presented to the governor on the 13th of this month.
Thank you for including the letter of support, so we have that information.
No problem.
in our
And if I
packet.
may add real fast, I apologize. If it is signed, it becomes effective July 1st of 2018, not January 1st, which is most common. There is a delayed implementation to begin July 1st, 2018.
So, kind of hearkening back to the loan topic we had last time, will this mean then if it passes, if the governor signs it, then psychologists would have more money in the pot that's for psychologists?
Yes.
Okay, and that would be given to psychologists?
Yeah.
Okay, all
Yeah.
righty.
All money that's paid by psychologists go to psychologists.
Okay, great.
It would be 200,000, I think, per year instead of 100,000, roughly.
And I know we had the presentation yesterday, and typically we've done an article every year towards this time of the year to highlight folks that have gotten the beneficiaries of the fund. It seemed like that would be a wonderful opportunity if it's signed to also include that information to share.
Yeah, I
One-
agree.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say for those of you who might be students or might be folks in training and going to be psychologists, want to be psychologists later. This is part of your loans for going to school, or your costs of your education are deferred or are paid for if psychologists or trainees agree to work in underserved, areas where there are underserved populations. So they may be rural areas. They might not necessarily be rural. They could be some inner city areas and stuff like this, and for a certain period of time. And then part of your education is paid for by agreeing to do that. And so understanding the cost of education, one of our concerns too, and one of the reasons that the board was talking about wanting to raise that fee from licensees was because people come out of school with a pretty high debt. And this would be a great way to get psychologists serving these populations as well as to help, pay some of your educational debts. So just to let y'all know that.
Thank you, Dr. Horn. And Ms. Sorick reminded me that, in our side of our notebooks on the left-hand side, the legislative calendar is listed. So as Mr. Glassbeagle is mentioning, the governor is reviewing and will make a decision to sign or not. October 15th is the deadline. So that's kind of our timetable right now with the legislative calendar. Thank you, Ms. Sorick. Sure.
Really quick, one other just side note. In our renewals, the board tells licensees how they can also contribute additional funds in the interim. If this bill does or does not go through, they can, on their own, contribute additional funds to our board fund, and that would go directly to the recipient. So just as a kind of additional information.
Thank you, Ms. Sorick. Any other board comments or questions about AB 1188? The next item is SB 547.
SB 547 is the board's omnibus bill. This board changes who can pay the psychological assistant registration fee to the board and would specify that the delinquency fee for board licensees is 50% of the renewal fee for each license type and not to exceed $150. As of the 13th, the bill is now on the third reading of the floor. It goes through 3 readings before it gets sent to the governor. So it is now waiting for its third reading and final vote before it will be presented to the governor if they pass it.
Any board comment on that item, SB 547? The next item, E, is SB 572.
SB 572 would prohibit healing arts boards under the Department of Consumer Affairs from issuing a disciplinary action or otherwise penalizing a licensee who commits a violation that does not cause irreparable harm to a consumer and is remedied within 15 days. Back in May, we were aware that the author is no longer pursuing the bill for the remainder of the legislative session, and that has not changed.
Questions from board members on SB 572?
And we did take an opposed position at the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
We did. Seeing no other comments or questions, we'll move to the last item in this section. It's SB 798, and this was one we also took a position at our August teleconference meeting. We changed from support, if amended, to watch, and there's been some activity since the teleconference meeting.
Yes, since the teleconference meeting, and just to remind everyone, this SB 798 is the medical board's sunset bill. It previously removed research psychoanalysts, which were or written to be moved under the Board of Psychology. It was taken back and put under Med Board, so it is not going to come to the Board of Psychology. So that's when our position went from support if amended to watch. Since then, they also removed, there was a section which would have required the board to disclose, or which would have required the licensees to disclose probationary status to specific patients in specific situations, and that was removed. And there was also language that had a waiver of client-patient privilege. If the board was doing an investigation, that language was also removed. Since then, the bill on the 13th was passed by both houses in order to engrossing and enrolling, which is what happens right before they give it to the governor.
Thank you, Mr. Glassbeagle. I see you have a question, Dr. Phillips.
Mr. Glass-Steagall, when you say the board in that context, you're talking about the Board of Medicine, is that correct?
The Medical Board of California, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And it sounds like you took back all of our questions and discussed it with them. I know we had a discussion. I know, Dr. Horn, you had offered quite a few comments regarding this one. Do you have any questions on this? Any other board questions or comments about SB 798? Hearing none, so those are the sections of the bills that as a board, we've taken a position on. Thank you for the updates. Is there any public comment any of those 6 bills, SB 798, SB 572, SB 547, AB 1188, AB 1456, or AB 244? If so, please come forward to the microphone. Okay, seeing no public comment, we'll move to the next section. And this is the watch bills, and this will be a larger section. And as we have discussed over the last year, actually the last 2 years, I think board staff have really casted wide nets to be able to look at all the bills that would in some way maybe touch the Board of Psychology. And so in this case, as we've done the last couple of meetings, we've not gone through each watch bill. We've asked if there are certain questions about any particular bills. I know in particular, the last couple of meetings, we've had conversation about what's listed as AAA, and there was one other we've talked a lot about.
XX.
That's right, XX, so SB 755 and ACR 8. So if you could just start off by giving us an update on those two, Mr. Glassbeagle, and if board members have any other comments or questions about any other bill, please indicate you want to speak, and then we'll have Mr. Glassbeagle give us an update.
Sure. So 16B2XX, which is SB 755, it's a mental examination, civil discovery bill.
Mr. Glassbeagle, one second, let the people
Oh, sure.
turn to
Oh, I'm
that
sorry.
section. So it's the blue tabs, it's under 16B2, so go to XX, it'll be towards the end, probably the 5th one from the end, or 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4th one from the back. Thank you. Mr. Glassbeagle.
This bill would limit, well, now limits, the mental examination of a child that is less than 15 years of age and has credible evidence of being sexually abused to psychological testing of no more than 3 hours, including breaks, unless the court grants an extension for good cause. The bill would also require the examination to be conducted by a licensed clinical psychologist or licensed physician. At the time of writing this, the bill was not signed by the governor, but as of July 24th, it had been signed by the governor.
Questions or comments from board members? And again, this is one we did not take any position on, we were just watching.
Correct. We did relay our concerns in writing, verbally, and via official letter, email, and verbally to the author and sponsor of the bill.
Thank you. And then that last one, I love
AAA.
saying the number 16B to AAA.
Yeah. ACR 8, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences, post-traumatic street disorder. This bill was signed on September 7th, and it would recognize adverse childhood experiences, also known as post-traumatic street disorder, in communities of color as having lasting negative outcomes to both physical and mental health with growing implications for California. And again, it is just a resolution, so it was no law was created with the signing of this resolution.
So
Dr.
can I
Horn?
ask a question about that? So a resolution brings this to light. Is that what happens? So what happens? I mean, a resolution is adopted, it's passed.
That's it.
Does it lead to anything? Does it
Doesn't have to.
help? Or does it start research? Does it,
Nope.
it doesn't? Okay.
There's different types of resolutions of commemorating different activities and stuff, but in terms of what this
True.
was passed, it was passed as it was written, so there was no action to be taken in this case, or no diagnosis. I know that was a question at one
Right.
point, to be a category that would be created. That was not the purpose of
Right.
the resolution from what we
Just saying
discussed,
This is a problem in California, and,
highlighting the problem.
yeah.
That's it.
Mr. Fu?
And I do want to emphasize the highlighting of the problem is key to elevating the conversation for at certain times, and so that is a part of the dynamic that goes with that, and just want to bring that up as well. So.
And I would say could be key. So, you know, so I think that's we don't know what would happen in terms of what will happen as a consequence of that. But the questions that we had in terms of a board and in terms of anything about diagnosis being set, a conversation could be started. You asked a question about research. I don't know what will happen. Were there any other bills that that staff wanted to share to highlight even more, or board members had questions about regarding any of these other bills that we were watching? And again, I just want to acknowledge the great work of the staff to cast the net very wide, and they have been tracking lots of different pieces of legislation. We have AAA. So we have a lot from A to AAA, so there's a lot there. Is there any other questions from board members, comments? Is there any questions from the members of the public or any comments? If you have a comment about any of the items from A to AAA, please come to the front and you can speak in the microphone. I think
How
you've
many-
got to hit
how
the
many peop-
button to, oh, yes, we said yesterday, you'll have no more than 5 minutes to offer your comments, correct?
Correct.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Kimberly Swady. I've spoken to you before, and some of this is the first time I've heard about this, and I'm making myself familiar with things that lots of boards are doing. And I often give cases of first impression. I just heard this gentleman speak on adverse childhood experiences, post-traumatic street disorder versus stress disorder, and that it seemed to be focusing on communities of color and perhaps socioeconomic, lower socioeconomic status. And while I believe that people of color and people with financial constraints and lower socioeconomic status do have adverse childhood experiences, I am extremely concerned when I hear a bill that focuses on the color of the child or the socioeconomic status of the child. Coming from the background that I come from, my parents being public school teachers, both of them, so I'm a pureblood. I have 2 public school teachers as parents, and they were more than 30 years each in the public schools. They worked with diverse populations of special needs and socioeconomic differences, and you name it. I grew up with that. And when I start hearing questions and problems framed in that, my radar goes off immediately. I'm going to refresh your memory. My background is I'm a lawyer. I have practiced family law. I recently came back into the profession when I was going through my own divorce and saw the huge problems in the therapeutic, legal, and judicial communities about how this is handled, gross misconduct, and I also have an MBA from the Wharton School. So I tend to approach things often in a business model. Yes, children are adversely affected by childhood experiences. The ACE scores are coming to light about how all of the impact that having negative childhood experiences does later in life, everything from shortened life expectancy, the prevalence of various sorts of physical and mental illnesses that may arise in a greater number because of these adverse childhood experiences. We're just touching on the surface of that. But I do not want this, I want the conversation out there, but I do not ever want to hear it framed in terms of color or in terms of economic status. This problem is pervasive, and it is across all socioeconomic groups, and it is across all color, and framing it like this is offensive to me as a multicultural woman and as a human being, because children in privileged backgrounds economically and children who are considered white, whatever that may mean, or not of color, are also undergoing adverse childhood experiences. And when you start phrasing things like, this is a problem over there, then all the people that are over here can say, that's not us, and this is false. I would say that more privileged white men are likely to get away with sexually abusing their children than a poor black man. I would say that based on my experience and the number of clients that are coming to me. I am in an area that serves the affluent, and these problems are pervasive. They are disgusting. They are not being addressed. So I would urge this board to approach such framing of problems very, very cautiously and very suspiciously. Is this an issue? Yes, it is. It's huge. It may be the civil rights issue of our time, the civil rights of children, not black children, not white children, not Asian children, not poor children, not middle-class children, not rich children, all children. And you, as mental health professionals, I expect you to be extremely diligent when we start calling this someone else's problem. It is all our problem. It affects all of us. Let there be no mistake about that. It is a huge issue, and it affects us all, and none of us escape the problems of this. Look very closely at these ACE scores, look very closely at all of the damage that is done to children in their childhood that haunts them for the rest of their lives. All children. It is not limited to poor children, children of color, or any group of children, and I urge you to be so suspicious when anybody approaches a problem in that manner. This is the civil rights issue of our time, the civil rights of all children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so very much. I think that I want to make sure as you come forward, keep in mind that we are looking at the issue of watch bills. These are no things that are being framed from this board. These are legislation that have been introduced by Assembly members and Senate members of the California legislature. And as the Policy and Advocacy Committee, we've looked at there's no need for a response. I'm just explaining where we are right now. We are looking at a position or not taking a position. All the bills that we're looking at now and asking people to comment on are from A to AAA. We as a board have not taken a position on any of these bills.
I hope my comments were helpful then, and you take a position.
Next person that's wanting to speak, member of the public, please go right ahead.
Hi, Catherine Campbell with California Protective Parents Association. I also would like to speak to this resolution, AAA, on the agenda. This was to basically, whereas all these conditions for what a study shows, and certainly, as I agree, for any child and any adult, you can be an adult and you can look at your ACE score, and we can see things differently within you of how you're going to develop with disease. So it's not even just children that we have to worry about with a study. But this is to resolve that this is being recognized. So once again, it's certainly not just for people, it's not a street disorder. It happens on every street in America. I mean, if you want to call America just full of streets, then fine, but this is not the term street. So I am coming to you today because yesterday when you met, I brought up the fact that children are experiencing this, and when we have evaluators who are psychologists looking at children who have experienced adverse childhood experiences, they don't have the trauma training that's needed. And secondly, we're not having their ACE score understood. We need to make sure children are having their ACE score understood, and if that's in the schools, we talked about yesterday Aaron's Law, how California does have Aaron's Law approved, that we are going to have age-appropriate training in the schools. We also can have Nadine Burke-Harris from the Center of Youth Wellness has recommended that all pediatricians get the ACE score. I would think that this board would recommend that children, we know what the ACE score are of our children. Why are children failing? We had a discussion yesterday about suicide rates. Well, this is one of the reasons why suicides go up. And if we're asking why suicides are going up, we need to understand what are their ACE scores. And they're very high. We know the CDC had to come out to Palo Alto and talk to them about the suicide rate there. There's people standing on train tracks that they're not cross guards. These are people making sure people aren't killing themselves. This is where we're at. We need to understand, not stay at the crosswalks as much as we need to, the railroad tracks, so they're not killing themselves on the train tracks, but we need to understand what can we do now to prevent them from getting to the train tracks. So adverse childhood experiences, I don't know, I think it's glad it's being recognized, and I think it's something you should watch. I will be contacting this assembly member to find out why it's written as it is, because that should be definitely changed. And as I said, I would like this board to move as much forward as you can to recommend that we know children's ACE scores, and we find out, and once we know them, let's take care of those problems before they affect their whole life. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Dr. Horn, I think you wanted to make a comment.
So I just wanted to talk to the two public members who've spoken so far, just to let you know where we are in this process. This is a legislative resolution. We had earlier brought up concerns about how it was worded. They were, in part, making a diagnosis out of something that we didn't feel was a diagnosis, and also our concerns that this is a larger issue and it doesn't only affect this one population. So we brought those comments already. So I just wanted to let y'all know, and it has moved ahead in this way.
And there was no position taken by this
That's
board,
right.
and it's already been chaptered and been signed.
That's right.
So I do think that if you have further questions, that would be a good suggestion to follow up with the author of the bill,
Yeah,
because that's nothing been
absolutely.
authored by the board.
All right. Hi, my name is Christina Mendez, and I'm a fourth-year student at Palo Alto University, so still in my training. And something that came up for me when this was talked about is, sure, it only encompasses like a certain specific kind of like demographic of youth, or maybe a few different ones. But it really resonated because I've worked many years in schools, volunteering as an instructional aide, as mentors, and also in my practicum training and research. And I volunteer in Oakland schools. I've done work in East Palo Alto and Santa Cruz, where there is a lot of really like traumatic experiences that these kids go through, like being shot at, being recruited for gangs, maybe not having enough food on the table to feel like they're able to, you know, concentrate or like function in society. And so it's nice to have this conversation started of recognizing like trauma in like the little T sense, as we call it, kind of like more of the chronic stressor style of trauma. And I've seen a lot of psychologists kind of like grapple for a way to really discuss what's happening on the streets with these youth. And that's not to say that, you know, kids of higher socioeconomic status don't experience very adverse childhood experiences as well. But kind of like this life on the streets, as it might be called, that kids in low socioeconomic statuses may be subjected to. Certainly, this seems like really, I don't know, I mean, for me, research-wise, I'm interested in like looking further into this and perhaps like helping to carry this conversation forward for those specific demographics. So I just wanted to bring that up, in like the flip side, that it's nice to have kind of like something to begin to frame this concept in when thinking about certain populations at risk. Yeah.
Thank you
all.
so much, and
Thank you.
continue, good luck with your studies.
Thanks.
And I will just say, also, as you're looking at just these documents, what you don't have, because you're not looking on the computer, the link to the whole text and everything, I think that in terms of the rubric of how things get categorized and get named, I think they're, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you were trying to get my attention. No. That may not clearly articulate the entirety of the piece of legislation. And so I know that it may not have the whole booklet. We have the matrix that we referred to earlier, where staff have done a summary of it, but also, what is the website? leginfo.ca.gov. Could be something where you would want to maybe look at the legislation in its entirety, because again, this is a rubric, some kind of way they come up with the naming of it, to do the colon and explain it. It doesn't totally explain the entire pieces of legislation when we're looking at them. Is there any other public comment on the watch bills that are listed here? Okay, hearing no more public comment, we'll move to the next section. C is the update on CANRA.
Yes, and there has been no update since the board's last meeting regarding CANRA, which is the California Child Abuse and Neglect Reporting Act. The last update was on May 10th, that the California Supreme Court granted the petition for review of the Matthews v. Harris case.
Question, do you happen to know a nominal or approximate timeline for the Supreme Court to consider petitions that have been granted? Would it be in years or months? I'm wondering.
I actually don't know. I do know that we are on a notification list where as soon as anything happens that we are notified of it, but I don't know their timeline. Maybe Ms. Mark, no.
And I-
It's enti-
and-
it's entirely up to the court. I mean, they may take years to think about it, or they may do it in a matter of days or months. So
Well,
we're kind of at their
That's
mercy.
helpful, yeah.
So how
And I know
are we?
Mr. Glassspiegel, one second, I know Mr. Glassspiegel, we ask him this every single time, and we appreciate you telling us this, but I know that you just don't know, and so I think that, appreciate you mentioning that as well, that it is the courts, and so this is kind of an out of our control situation, but I know that as soon as, I know everyone's eagerly anticipating a decision, so we appreciate the work that you're doing and know that the fact that you have no response on this, it doesn't mean not action, we just don't have information. But Dr. Horn, you had another question?
So at this point, what is the interpretation or the decision on camera? Right now? Yeah,
They don't have one till the legislation's done.
okay. And so what, but where are we? Because I think we were told something different than the Board of Behavioral Sciences, right? That's one reason we asked for the
My
Attorney
understanding
General.
of the situation, Ms. Marks can certainly, is that the Board of Behavioral Sciences was given a specific opinion.
Yeah,
We asked the Attorney General for an opinion, so I don't know that the Department of Consumer Affairs Legal Counsel took a position
okay.
based on our question.
Yeah.
The Attorney General's office said they could not
They
issue
can't,
that
yeah.
until the Supreme Court decision's
Okay.
been made.
All right.
Is that accurate? Okay.
And I think if you look on page 2 of the memo,
Yeah.
on that second paragraph on that second page, I think that is really, nothing has changed. And I know we insert this at every time to keep it on track, but nothing has changed, right, Ms. Marks?
Not as far as I know. I think the Matthews v. Harris case may be a little bit broader than what this board initially discussed with respect to the difference in the. I think the Matthews v. Harris case may be a little bit broader than what this board has discussed, particularly with respect to the Board of Behavioral Sciences question that they reviewed, but the Office of the Attorney General is not providing any legal opinion until the Supreme Court has ruled in this case.
Is there any public comment about that item? And again, everyone will have 5-minute maximum, so if you could help me time keep, Ms. Sork, I appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Winckelmann. I'm the Director of Professional Affairs at the California Psychological Association, and I'm going to be brief, I think, with this. I wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, thank you for maintaining this item on your agenda. I wanted to mention that this is an ongoing area of concern for people. We get questions about people who are trying to properly follow the reporting mandates, but there is no clarity in terms of what's out there right now on some of the issues that are asked in the questions to the Attorney General. So I wanted to ask if you have, what is the guidance in the interim that is recommended for psychologists? If this could take years for us to get the Attorney General's opinion, what is the guidance that is recommended for psychologists to follow now?
I don't think my position has changed at all, and I've shared that several times, which is that the Board of Behavioral Sciences had been given the opinion that there was no statutory basis for the distinction of sex acts that needed to be reported. I think this board, and I agreed statutorily with that opinion, I think what this board has discussed several times is that it is dangerous to tell the practitioners, go ahead and change how you have been previously reporting, because those distinctions have come up in the secondary sources over the course of 25, 30 years. The reporting requirements are in the penal code. They're not in the psychology practice licensing law. And I think what I have shared as my concern is for this board to say everything you knew before is different, go ahead and either report or not report, when those laws are enforced by the county district attorney's offices. And I think I've shared that several times, and I'm sorry if that's not clear, but I do think that there is a little danger in going forward and saying what you thought wasn't reportable is, or vice versa, if this board is not the agency to enforce those laws that are contained within the penal code. Because if there is a criminal conviction for the failure to report, this board would have to take a look at that conviction and determine whether or not discipline was warranted. And I think that's where the danger lies in saying that this board agrees with the opinion that was given to the Board of Behavioral Sciences.
I think to put it another way that maybe is a little bit more to the point, we can't give guidance without knowing what the law is, and we don't know at this point. And we're waiting for the Supreme Court and the Attorney General's office to further clarify that. We can't guess at it because people want answers to questions.
Would it be possible, similar to the Board of Behavioral Sciences attorney's opinion, would it be possible for the Board of Psychology to get an official opinion in that way? I understand what you're saying, so I'm not trying to ask the same thing. I guess I'm wondering why, if they can have an attorney's opinion so that their licensees can rely on that in the meantime, is that something that it would be possible for us to also get?
I believe that's how this conversation got started several years ago.
Okay, I don't think I was here for that,
And I think what I had said is, while I don't disagree with the opinion that was given to the Board of Behavioral Sciences, there are 25 to 30 years worth of secondary sources that have made distinctions that are not clear why statutorily they may have come down the road in that way. And while I don't necessarily disagree with the opinion given to the Board of Behavioral Sciences, again, the mandatory reporting laws are not enforced by this board. They are enforced as criminal acts by the district attorney's office of the different counties in California. If it should be a conviction, which I believe it may be what happened in this underlying case, although I don't recall, actually, it's been a while. But if there is to be a conviction, if a licensee were to suffer a conviction for failure to report, this board will get notice of that conviction and will have to determine whether or not to bring a disciplinary action. So that is why I think the board has not wanted to say, go ahead and decide not to report what you thought was reportable all of these years, for 25 to 30 years, when you look at these secondary sources, because the board is not going to be the sole, the administrative consequences are not the sole consequences that a licensee could suffer. They could suffer criminal consequences because the district attorney's office may not see the laws in the same way as this board. So it all got started years ago when BBS received that opinion, and we had to try to look at why there were years and years of distinctions that had come down. So without being able to know what those are, that's why we went to the Office of the Attorney General. And in the meantime, this board does not want to lead any of their licensees down the primrose path of saying, sure, don't report what you always thought was reportable. It's okay, because a district attorney's office may feel differently.
Or vice versa, that you should report something in particular that had not previously been reportable, in which case, if that's ultimately determined that that was not reportable, you've breached the client's confidence. So you know what a morass you get into with these reporting laws.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have enough clarity at this point to give guidance.
Okay, I appreciate your comments. I understand the difficulty of the circumstances. And I also just wanted to mention that, of course, it's also addressed, the AG's opinion is not only addressing the distinction between different types of sexual acts, but also, of course, sexting between minors. So we look forward to having some more clarification
We do too.
about that reportability.
And I
as
believe
well.
that's why I said that
Thank
case of the
you.
things is broader than
Yeah.
what was originally contemplated when this board looked at the opinion that had been given to BBS.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Winckelmann. Is there any other public comment about the update on CANRA? Please come forward to the microphone.
Melody Schaefer, Vice Chair of KPIC and designee for Division II of CPA. Yeah, I'm very concerned about how individual psychologists will handle this very nebulous kind of position that we're all stuck in. And when it comes to child abuse, I think errors of commission are much better in terms of reporting than errors of omission because you're putting someone vulnerable at risk. Would the board be willing to consider putting something out there for our constituency, the psychologists, along the line of, if you're not sure, to contact, because the reporting agency is DCFS, to contact DCFS and ask for a consultation. They are the state reporting agency. When I call and there's something fuzzy, or I have postdocs or have had interns that was fuzzy, I said, call and speak to the consultation line to ask, is this a reportable offense? I think taking at least a more prudent approach helps protect those who may be vulnerable, and also helps the psychologists not just take all that decision-making in a fuzzy situation upon themselves. I think it may be a more balanced position to move into while we're waiting for, as we've said, years for the AG to possibly make a decision when harm could come to those who are vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schaefer. Did you want to say that?
Dr. Schaefer, would you like to write an article for our newsletter?
Yes, I would.
Okay, great. The staff will be coordinating with you around that topic.
I'm changing my address and phone number.
Too late. Is there any other comments about the update on CANRA?
Catherine Campbell. And I appreciate that this is being looked at, and the comments that we've heard very clearly say that there's an issue with this. Currently, if a child, of course, we're going back into sexual abuse, and if that is one of the ACE study points, that questions, and when they ask these questions, have you been sexually abused? It's not really a diagnosis, it's like a yes or no, right? I mean, these are very simple questions. We certainly know many children can't tell in the beginning, and they might not ever tell, or they might wait till their 40s, or financially, emotionally, physically independent. But my question is, with this reporting, it's very vague, and I believe what I've read is a lot of this has to do with minors versus minors and the age. And if you look at 288, there's differently age associations with these penal code sections. But I think it's not clear to many psychologists when something's reportable. We have people calling in, California Protective Parents Association, asking some of these questions because they don't feel as if they're getting right answers from their psychologists or evaluators. So if a child walked into an evaluator who has a license from your board and says that they've been sexually abused, but have no dates or times that happened, is that reportable? I mean, that's a question to you.
The most appropriate way to determine that would be for them to call the department, the particular department there, to get an opinion as to whether they would take a report for that. So for instance, I live in Los Angeles County. It's not called Child Protective Services in Los Angeles County. It's called the Department of Children and Family Services. They will give you a definitive answer whether they consider it reportable and there's sufficient information. They're the gatekeepers as to whether a report's going to be taken or not. But that would be certainly a situation in which I think most psychologists would certainly make that telephone call in order to get consultation to determine whether there's sufficient information there. And that's in part dependent on the reporting agency.
So the reporting agency, whether it's CPS, Department of Children and Family Services, or Department of Family and Children Services, depending on which county you're from, these are penal codes, mandate reporters. This is not up to any quote-unquote CPS agency to say, yes, maybe that should be reportable or not. These are very clear. If there is any indication, any suspicion, you need to report.
You can also report to law enforcement.
Correct. I'm not.
So you can make that choice, and then they will decide.
Excuse me one second. Ms. Marks, are we talking about this issue about, is this related to the camera? Because I know we're specifically on one item here on the agenda. Because I know, is that too broad? I just need some clarity. I think the public comment has to relate to this agenda item, and I just want to make
Right.
sure we're not getting outside of the update on the Camera
Right.
Act.
I do think that previously, with respect to this issue, we have discussed where is the board in giving guidance to practitioners. I don't think it's very useful or, potentially outside of the agenda item to get into specifics, specific cases. So, so I would
make
caution
sure.
you to start discussing, is this particularly reportable, is that particularly reportable, as opposed to what is the board going to do with respect to guidance until we're awaiting the decision here.
Right. So I will definitely voice my opinion that there should be an opinion because people need guidance. We've been hearing that in other public comment already today. This is crucial. I mentioned yesterday, a child is sexually abused once, stays with them their entire lives. If we wait 2.5 years for the AG's office to determine a situation with a complaint, if we wait multiple years for an opinion or whoever we're waiting for, the Attorney General, to come to this, we're allowing children to be hurt. And it is if we need an opinion or we need determination or a policy made that when children are reporting this, that they can have immediate safety. Because we can't decide and we take years to do something. It's not fair to the child who's sitting in that situation, day after day, night after night, knowing, am I going to be able to sleep tonight or am I going to be abused tonight? Whether it's anyone underneath that roof. These are very serious issues, and I know you're taking them seriously, and I'm glad you have this on the agenda, and I appreciate this. But we need people to make sure we can figure out a way to protect children right away. And I hope the board can take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Whether it's for this or any other ACE situation.
Ms.
I just have
Bernal?
a quick question. Is your organization also, though, couldn't you call the AG's office as well and, stress, obviously this is a very important issue, but are you doing that as well?
We're calling many agencies, and I wasn't here this morning because I was at the Judicial Council meeting. So we're talking to everyone, but thank you. I mean, it's on your agenda, you're touching on it, it affects, right now you have psychologists who are acting as the judge. Whatever your evaluators write are pretty much rubber stamped. The judges do not have time to review this. It is coming down to, tens of thousands of
That's
dollars.
actually not true, as our legal counsel mentioned in terms of the process. Ms. Marks, did you want to, I think that we're not the only folks looking at this.
No, I'm not saying you're not the only people looking at it. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, when you have a child who's been sexually abused, it's time, I'm just going to finish this.
Okay.
When you have a child who's being sexually abused, if it happens within a family, you go to divorce court, you go to family court, no matter where you are in California. Many times they ask for an evaluation. That's when your department comes in. That's your role. The evaluators are usually licensed psychologists. And I am saying that most of their evaluations are rubber stamped. The judges do not have time. to do this, and that's why they're
This,
hired.
this is outside of the CANRA Act.
I'm just answering
No,
your question.
No, but she's referring to the CANRA Act in terms of the pushing forward and getting this, so that her question to you was about the agenda item. So we're not talking about the issue of psychological evaluations. And I just will also say for all the folks too that haven't been at our meeting, this has been an agenda item for the last 3 years. So this is not something that is new for the board to look at, and we've been tracking it, and it has been a process, so.
Right. And that's my whole point. It's been 3 years.
So as we mentioned about the court system and explained it, and I know if you, just on the agenda, you wouldn't have the copy of the whole history of this process, but I just wanted to make sure
I
that,
read through it last
that
night.
we're clear on what you're saying in terms of the agenda item sticking to the CANRA Act and the update.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
We're gonna, actually, I think we should probably take a break for lunch now, and then we can come back and continue public
I think
comment.
there's, okay. The president is saying that we're taking a break for lunch, and we'll come back to agenda item 16.
Yeah. We're gonna come back at 1:30. So we're adjourned till 1:30. Thank you. Excuse me, we're recommencing. Do we need to take a roll again? No, okay. We're on agenda item number 16, the 16C, the update regarding the California Child Abuse and Neglect Reporting Act.
Okey doke. Thank you, Dr. Phillips. We're actually 16-2C.
Oh,
I love when it's all the numbers.
oh,
Is there any more public comment about the update regarding CANRA and mandated reporting? Okay, here. Yes.
Ms. Jones, I just wanted to say that we did talk to a couple of the people who made comments and reassured them that they could, if they thought there had been an evaluator who had, or a licensee who had not properly reported as they should, that they could file that complaint with the board.
Thank you very much. And I feel like, Ms. Marks, that was something I know that was a carryover from our June meeting for the Enforcement Committee to look at their upcoming meeting too, to ensure that maybe that's an article or some kind of way to inform folks about processes. So thank you so very much.
so we're now moving on to item number 17.
Yes.
This is for legislative items for future meeting. Obviously, the board cannot comment, but to the extent people want to suggest legislative items that need to be added to a future agenda, this would be the time to do so. Any members of the public that have legislative items to add? Okay, so we're going to move.
I actually have an
Oh,
item.
okay, I'm sorry.
And it's not an item. I may phrase this incorrectly. I would love for staff or Mr. Glassbeagle to perhaps you and Ms. Sorick and possibly Ms. Marks figure out the value of keeping the item, the update on camera on the agenda if we don't have a different update. Because I feel as though it becomes a confusing conversation every time it opens up again. I think it's great that we have had the decision about having an article, but I'm just curious for the issue of confusing it. I think even as board members, we might get confused and say, well, what's our process? And you say the same thing every time, and I don't know if there's not an update. Is there value for it to be on the agenda? So I'd love for staff and legal counsel to figure out and offer that up for us as you create the next agenda.
Just to address that particular item, I brought up the same subject, taking a walk to lunch. And what I was informed, which makes a lot of sense to me, is if there was a change in status as to CANRA, that it would need to be on the agenda in order for the board to, or the staff to present it to us at the next board meeting. So that was a thinking in putting it on the next agenda, but we can certainly discuss that when the next agenda is created.
Yeah, and I would just say, because since it's, thank you, Dr. Phillips. You're so smart. We think alike. I will just say, I just feel like because it's been on the agenda for 3 years, and so maybe if it's 2 times a year for a placeholder, that's useful. But I agree that if it makes sense for that to happen, but I think if it's causing a confusing discussion, which I think it has the last couple of meetings, I just think that maybe you might have better insight, staff and legal counsel.
And perhaps one of the things we can do is look at the updates that we're getting to know whether or not the case is fully briefed, for example. If it's not fully briefed, then we clearly don't think we'd be getting a decision from the Supreme Court. And if we don't think there's a likelihood we'd be getting a decision from the Supreme Court, we would leave it off the agenda, something like that. And that's something I don't think we have done. We've just kept it on there in case there was an update, so we can do that.
And this is no reflection on staff, but it does feel like a very repetitive item where same questions come up every time. So maybe we could have a little respite from it, at least at the next board meeting.
And remembering that we always have the option, as this 17 agenda item states, to hold a special meeting. So if there was something that was called and it was given the importance of this type of issue, if we needed to, would that be an item much like we did for the teleconference for legislative updates? Could that not be considered the same thing?
Probably not. I would have to look at the bases for a special meeting because it's not legislation. It's not litigation that the board's involved in. So I don't know that there'd be a need, a basis for a special meeting, but we could certainly call it 10-day meeting.
Unless there's any comment from the public, why don't we move on to agenda item number 18. Ms. Jones?
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Mr. Glassfiegel,
Thank
we
you.
have some updates on regulatory.
Yes, agenda item 18 was revamped for this meeting to include all the regulatory packages that the board is going to be working on from now until as much as we know of, basically. And so I categorized them in before the initial review stage, the new initial review stage between the department and the board and agency, and then the formal rulemaking process once the package enters the actual one-year calendar with the Office of Administrative Law. So packages A and D on the agenda are the standards for practice of telehealth and continuing professional development. Those are pending the initial review stage. So staff is creating the initial documents and preparing the items that will be delivered to the Department of Consumer Affairs and Legal for their review, and that will begin the initial review stage. So those two packages are still being created in the office. The psychological assistance regulatory package is in the initial review stage between the department and staff. And then the verification of experience and supervision agreement form finished the formal rulemaking process on June 5th, 2017, and becomes effective on the 1st of next month. Any questions?
So I would just imagine in terms of next steps for the one that just became official, much like the other pieces of legislation in the other section about we'll do an advisory, FAQ, and that type of thing as needed.
Yes, the advisory has been completed. I believe it was sent to the internet team, and we're just waiting for it to be posted.
Thank you so very much for that update. Any questions from board members on these items? Any public comment?
So my name is Shari Kirkland. I'm a psychologist, and I realized, or it came to my attention 3 or 4 years ago, that the board was making some changes to license renewal process and what was being required. And I had a question. I'm curious as to why the changes are coming about. If someone could just give me a brief overview as to why we're changing from strictly continuing education to the CPU system, or that there's been a proposal to make that change.
So at this point in time, we've got to address these items on the agenda, and the CPD is not on this one, is it? I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong item. I hadn't flipped it over. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can respond to you, but I would love for Dr. Horn, because I know, if you don't mind, because I know this has been something that has been taken up by the licensing committee in a big way. So if you could respond, Dr. Horn. Your microphone.
Thanks. So I'm going to give kind of a short version because it has been going on for several years. But basically in the psychology community across the United States, and research that's been done, it's been more and more evident that CE alone, and now we're just talking about classroom kind of traditional ways that CE has been offered, has actually not demonstrated that people remain competent or update their skills or any kind of thing like that. So there's not a lot of evidence about it, but kind of the different methods that people use to update their skills and remain competent, the least effective are those classroom experiences. So this began actually kind of nationally as a look about this and kind of what does actually lead to maintenance of competence. And through a bunch of studies that were done, it evolved that psychologists, in fact, although they do get their CE courses, what they report is that the things that are actually more helpful to them are their peer consultation groups, their serving on boards or committees where they're working with ethics or laws or stuff like this. So and people were doing that anyway. So part of this was, let's bring the things that psychologists do that we actually know helps them stay competent. So to broaden it, that was the original thinking, was to broaden the kinds of things that psychologists can do that count toward continuing professional development. Okay.
The only other thing I would add to that as well would be, you know, as some of those, I suggest that some of those examples that was mentioned by Dr. Horn was also to try to promote, to decrease isolation and create some other opportunities for learning across and peer learning opportunities.
Right.
The other thing I will say too, and I'm so sorry, I realized the D was up and I was looking at B and C. I thought we were on the next page. But also as a board, 2.5 years ago, we initiated this process, and so we've started over. So before, and you may have a follow-up question, but before you do that, if I could ask Mr. Glassspiegel to explain the process by which we would do it. Like, we're at the beginning, but what happens next? Because I know it's an extensive process after the hearing, et cetera.
Yeah, the continuing professional development regulatory package has to be created in the office first with all the required documents. It'll be submitted to the Department of Consumer Affairs, to our legal counsel, Ms. Marks. She will review it, and staff and her will go back and forth with revisions as necessary. Once it's signed off by Ms. Marks, it will begin a journey through the Department of Consumer Affairs, where it will go through more legal review, legislative and regulatory review, budget review, agency review, and then it will come back to the Board of Psychology, and we will be given the all clear to notice the package with the Office of Administrative Law. After we notice the package with the Office of Administrative Law, we have to hold a 45-day comment period where we don't do anything but wait for comments. Once the 45-day comment period closes, we will then hold a hearing at the next upcoming board meeting to give public a chance to comment on the package and the language in the package.
Further, yeah.
Yes. After that, the board will consider all of the comments that are presented, determine whether they are substantive, non-substantive, germane, non-germane, and then we will respond to the comments in the regulatory package documents. And then once that is completed, we will submit it, and we've completed the rest of the regulatory documents. There's a few other follow-up documents that have to be completed. We will submit it back to the Department of Consumer Affairs to go through a final review, and then we'll come back to the board, and we will have the okay, all clear, to submit the package to the Office of Administrative Law for their final review to make sure that we didn't deviate from the act that's under, yeah. And then they will review it, and they have 30 days to review, and it, all said and done, it's a year plus for this whole process.
And I only share that because we're at the very beginning of this phase, and before we've gotten to this point, licensing committee has had some public comment. I know another licensing committee member wants to jump in, but I just wanted to explain that, and it is a process.
And I guess the thing I would emphasize is, although we've received a lot of public comment on a prior regulatory package, and as a result withdrew that package, Okay, and so we withdrew that package to respond to the concerns that have been
Right.
expressed. Many of them were incorporated into the regulations. But there will be lots of additional opportunity for comment. And I think we've done a better job of keeping licensees apprised of the fact that we were going through this process now, and we'll continue to do so as we proceed through the process.
And more importantly, it isn't the same package.
Yeah.
I think that part is about
Yeah.
the responding to it, and so that's important. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have just one follow-up question. I am certainly aware of research that indicates that more active learning is what helps us to maintain, the gains. You said that there were methods used to assess the competence, what psychologists were able to maintain following CE courses. And I was wondering, not trying to grill you, but do you know what they used to assess the competence post-CE?
I don't think I said exactly that,
Okay.
but what I said was that the evidence that we do have suggests that the least effective way of maintaining competence, changing the way people practice, all that kind of stuff, is the classroom. That's what we were really looking at, that classroom, traditional kind of way that CE has been given.
Right. Okay.
Now a lot of organizations now are incorporating some of these other ways of offering, what they're calling CE, but it might be consultation groups, it might be reading groups, so they're offering things other than the straight classroom, but that's what got us, that's where we were when we started
I
this.
understand. Thank you. You've answered my questions.
Sure.
Oh, please, Ms. Orrick.
Just two quick comments. Just a quick comment on the current package that the board has recently ratified. That would require that out of the 36 hours, that 27 could still be in traditional continuing education, with the 9 hours needing to be in continued professional development. The other real quick thing is that the current package has an implementation date of 2021. So this will be quite a process, not just for the regulatory process, but for the effective date if it goes all the way through. So I just wanted to add those two quick things.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And I think in reaction to concerns about how the hours were allocated, there's actually an additional 6 hours of self-study, if I recall correctly. What title we used for it, I forget. Independent study. 6 hours of additional independent study that you could do. So conceivably, although we hope that people use the broad range of things, it may not have to look very substantially different than what you're doing now, but we're trying to encourage people to do things that are more participatory, where they also have a sense of accountability, like a peer supervision group where you discuss a case and then your colleagues would comment on it. It gives it a different vibrancy to the process.
I understand. Thank you.
Hi, Kate Lunhart. I'm a psychologist. And so I just wanted to reiterate what Dr. Kirkland said, that this is an extreme change in the way that we accrue, and you call it now CPD into CEUs. And it has quite an impact on people depending on where they practice and their access to colleagues and other ways to maintain current practices. And I also just wanted to mention that I think that as a psychologist, I'm motivated internally to stay current. And so I do consult with colleagues. I do read the literature. So I do a lot of this that now you're requiring. And so it's not going to make much difference in the way that I practice psychology. But I think it's quite a burden for people in private practice to be able to do this. I have colleagues in private practice. I'm just concerned about that. So I did have just one quick question because your comments really answered it all. I really appreciate it. So apparently
Before you ask your question, can Dr. Horn respond to that first part? Because I don't know if extreme departure is what it would be. Because as was explained, some of the items currently with continuing ed are still acceptable, but Dr. Horn wanted to respond. I know she wanted to jump in.
Okay,
and before you answer your question.
Sure.
So yeah, still 27 out of the 36 hours can be gotten in those traditional classroom ways. We're not saying that you're required to do anything but 9 more hours in some other way. It doesn't, you know, you have to do it in 2 different ways. That's what we're,
Right.
you know, that's the thing. It can be any of those things. And what you just said, I do a lot of those things already. And that's what we were finding. I mean, and that's what research tells us, that psychologists, they may get their continuing education requirements, just the straight classroom thing, but they're doing all these other things as well, because that is the way they stay current. They, you know, aren't isolated. It helps them kind of think about things differently, all that kind of stuff, that more active participation. So our aim was to broaden what psychologists can do and give you credit for those things that you're already doing, rather than not getting credit for those but still doing them anyway, because we know it's those things, at least from what the research says, that are really the most helpful.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what psychologists say.
Right.
So let me just say, none of this has to be in person. So we don't have any restriction on whether things can happen distance-wise, anything like that. That's not in the current regulations. So somebody in private practice, to just kind of use your example, maybe 9 times in 2 years could have lunch with a colleague and talk about cases, or be in a consult group and talk about cases. I don't think it's going to present a hardship. Or be on the telephone and talk about a case with, you know, with a colleague. I don't think this is going to present a hardship to anyone. I think it's going to expand their opportunities, and they're going to be able to use things that they can't use now toward their continuing professional development credit.
Well, I think that I like the opportunity to get credit for activities that are very instrumental and being a good psychologist, but this is actually mandated that you do different things rather than just giving opportunities to get credit, say, for a consultation group on the phone or in person.
You have to do 2 things.
It's
2 different things.
I just want to make that distinction. It's required, not just an opportunity.
Suga had another comment too.
And just to add to that, I just wanted to clarify that 9 hours of doing something that some of the psychologists that are already practicing would actually be less time that you're going to be taking out of your practice to do those courses, because it's already part of your practice anyway. So in a way that can offset the number of courses, the time that you're going to take taking those online courses.
Okay.
And save money as well.
At a personal level, I don't know that this is particularly helpful, but like most of the other psychologists on the board, I'm in private practice, and as you might imagine, I look through the lens of what's this going to do to me when I do my CE? And the answer is it's going to make it easier. I'm looking forward to the requirements. I don't feel it's an extreme change. I don't think it's going to be a hardship. I think it's going to be beneficial for me and easy to do. So that's not true for everyone, but
No, I don't think it is. Not for all my colleagues, but I appreciate your comments to try to clarify what your intent is. So if I can ask one little question, is that okay? So apparently the memorandum that I have from Jacqueline Everhart, the CE Renewals Coordinator, is quite dated. And I'm wondering, where can I find those on the Board of Psychology website, the more updated, the most recent memorandum? CPD.
Are you referring to the most updated language?
Correct.
The most
Or regulations proposed?
Yeah, the most updated regulation language was voted on in the past 2 board meetings. And so if you look at the August teleconference meeting, that was a little bit added to the package. And then the June meeting in LA was the major package that was voted on. And I believe Ms. McCochran can.
Oh, yeah, and I got your emails, and I can also forward you those.
Okay. Okay. And so I do get the emails from the Board of Psychology about, updates, and I kind of missed that. And I was just wondering, because we really look for that. And I was just wondering
they're
how
not
I missed
effective
it.
yet.
No, but I mean just
So
that
you're
it was
clear on that?
available to be read.
Probably because they haven't been noticed yet, right?
Right.
So you'd get the email once they get noticed.
Okay,
If
great.
you're on the interested parties list, you'd
I
get
am.
the email that says that they've been noticed, right?
Okay, so I haven't missed it. It just
We're at the
has-
very beginning phase. That's why I wanted Mr. Glass-Steagall to explain what is happening. We haven't noticed it at all for hearing. It just got approved to begin the process. We're at the very, very beginning.
Okay.
The package that you're looking at was presented at a board meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and to the licensing committee meeting. So there was other than the last two meetings, there was nothing presented to anybody, including the board, other than the updated language at those two meetings. So those were on the agendas of the last two board meetings.
Mhm.
So you can find the materials there, but there has not been like the package disseminated to licensees and interested public at this point because we don't have the documents ready yet.
Okay.
But the updated language is available on our website under the last two board meetings. And I can help you find it later if you need it.
Well, I think just in a sense, so that's great. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for those questions, and we are glad to know that you were a part of the last process at offering your feedback, and so we hope to see you at another meeting where we have a conversation about it in more detail. Before I give it back to you, Dr. Phillips, I just want to just acknowledge the hardworking staff. It's a lot of activity, and I know that in the last 3 to 4 years, we've really aim to be very more active on the policy and advocacy and regulatory front, and we have done that. And so I just want to thank you because there's a lot of agenda items on today's day of agenda that you've done a lot. Thank you, Mr. Glass-Steagall.
My pleasure, and thank you to Mr. Leitzel for all his hard work as well.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we're moving to agenda item number 19. That's the Outreach Committee updates. Ms. Burnell?
Thank you. We will be short and sweet. I just want to start. But there's a reason why. It's not for the reasons you're thinking.
You're not there.
I just want to start with, we have not had a meeting since our last board meeting because we're going to start again in 2018. So that's the reason why. So not too many updates have been, we don't have too much that's changed here. Okay. So the strategic plan update, agenda item 19A. Ms. Sorek, would you like to give us a little update on that?
I included a hand carry that I also emailed out to the board members that had some additional updates from what was originally in the board meeting packet. So what you'll see is the update as of September 2017, and there's some highlighted areas, and those areas were highlighted because statuses were moved out or goal completion dates were moved out, and most of them were because of where we are in the regulatory process. For example, continuing professional development, we had to have the board review an additional section at the last meeting, and then we're going to be ready to draft that regulatory package and start the initial review phase for that. Also, the practice of telepsychology, that's another regulatory package. So those were the examples of things that were moved out. And then the statement of issues and public reprimands section, that item has been moved to the enforcement committee to discuss. So that has also been pushed out based on the timing of the committee. And that's it.
Questions from the board?
I have a question or a comment, and it's on page 3, and it's highlighted at the top, ongoing visits to schools to educate students and trainees on licensing process. I just want to say that I do this. I have a webinar, and I do this across the country to different student groups and, groups of trainees, and kind of appear like on a Zoom call kind of thing. I talk about licensing in general, and talk about a lot of aspects of licensing. But I do want to say that I can certainly do this. It may not be as a board member, but this is something I do with ties with the education and training community. And I've done it for several groups in California, just talking about licensing in general and the EPPP and things like that. So I just want to let y'all know I can do that. I can continue to do that. And
It's great to know.
It's just
Thank you.
as part of, if it's okay, I mean, I don't do it as a board member, but, just to let you know.
I think one of the issues we've been trying to relay is some of the requirements that may be different for our state.
Right.
If there's maybe a way that Ms. Chung and I can give you some information that as you have these phone calls that you can also share that information, because any opportunity to have an audience with this group of people, applicants and students, on verification of experience,
Right.
supervised professional experience, hours, what's required form-wise to submit to the board.
I can definitely do it for any place I do here in town. I just want to make sure it's okay. That's what, I mean, here in town, here in the state. I just wanted to say I'm doing that, and I just wanted to make that clear, but I could certainly do it and say, I'm on the board and then talk about our specific things.
Thank you.
So-
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank
For in-state stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any public comment?
Hi, Dr. Jo Linder Crow at CPA. Related to what you just said, if we wanted to have you do something like that as a webinar that CPA would host, how would we go about requesting that?
If it were a webinar, as long as there wasn't some out-of-state travel, if it was something that, is it something you were thinking about hosting locally and Dr. Horn could come and do the presentation, or?
No, I mean a webinar where you could do it from your house. I mean,
I think the,
I mean, we have a webinar platform that we use to do. Yes, well, we should talk about that if we set this up. But it could be interesting. We have a webinar platform that we use to do webinars. So we do several webinars a year. And so if we wanted to host a webinar for our graduate students, for early career psychologists, or anybody else that wanted to learn more about the licensing process, would we need to put in a request of some kind? Or you can answer me later, but I mean, it sounds like something that might be of interest.
I guess it depends on whether you're going to be doing it as a board member or if you're going to be doing it in your private capacity. Obviously, you don't need any permission from us in the private capacity, but if we wanted to do it as an official board function, I think maybe you could coordinate with Ms. Zork.
yeah, that would be fine. I mean, according to the Administrative Procedures Manual, if, any kind of outreach that's board sanctioned just has to go through the board president. So it sounds like you just got his approval, so.
So we're not going to run into any of the same issues we did when we asked to collaborate on an ethics workshop.
I think the nature of this involvement is much easier for us to say this is a strategic plan goal. This is getting helpful, useful information out to applicants and students that are going to be going through our process. I would just say that perhaps Ms. Chung and I can maybe be in the room with you when you do the presentation, just in case there's any specific questions that you don't have the form or the resource for, then that way we can just help answer the question. But that would be my only
You could all wear
we normally
pajamas.
do, we normally do this based with a set of slides, PowerPoint. So as long as there was a PowerPoint presentation that maybe somebody could review.
I have a
and you-
PowerPoint
and you base it
presentation,
on
but I
that,
think
then-
I'd want to change it and should be changed for the
Okay.
California
Yeah, that'd be great.
schools only. or
Okay, thank you.
trainees only.
And I think one of the big
Thank you.
differences with the ethics workshop is that the board members who were participating would have been in the position of opining on whether or not in certain scenarios that were going to be set up, whether there had been a violation or not. And I think we felt very strongly that the board members should not be in a position of saying, yes, this is okay, this is not, in case there were
Okay.
something that came before the board.
But
that
you
as a
could answer
complaint.
questions about the licensing process and how the board, some of the, just mostly the licensing process, how long things take, what the process is, how to do it and so forth. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Ms. Chung and I did a very similar thing for Division 2. It was quite a successful endeavor. We were talking to, obviously, training directors primarily about supervised professional experience, but it seemed to be very well received, and it was great to get the information out there, and I think people were happy to have the information.
Thank you. And agenda item B, no changes have taken place since our last meeting, but Ms. Sorek, do you have anything to add to our communication plan update?
The communications plan has not changed since the June meeting.
Thank you. Any questions? Public comment? Moving on to agenda item 19C, our website and social media update. Mr. Glassspiegel, can you please provide us with an update?
Absolutely. Attached in your meeting materials is your website and social media data update. Listed are the top 5 web pages that were viewed between July 1st and August 30th of this year. Below that, we have the new format for presenting information, which has the quarterly numbers of the most recent newsletter, the newsletter page, and then continuing education page, laws and regulations page, filing a complaint page, applicant information page, and disciplinary actions page. The most recent newsletter is the spring newsletter. For the record, the summer newsletter is on our website as of this morning, so anyone that's anxious to read it, they can find it on our website. And I'm available for any questions.
No? Public comment? Moving on to agenda item D. And this also has not changed since our last June board meeting. Ms. Sorek has stepped out, but it hasn't changed, so correct? Mr.
That is correct. The update on focus groups and user friendliness of the board website has not changed. We moved the timeline for meeting with Solid to go through the review of our website and hold focus groups to after the stakeholder meetings were completed, which have now been completed, and I believe we are looking to this in 2018.
Correct. Any questions? Public comment? Okay, and you just provided us, we're now on agenda item 19E. Again, this is our spring newsletter, and again, their new one, the summer, just went out today. Well, it's on the website.
It is available on the website today. I believe 2 email blasts went out, one to our entire interested parties list, and then another one to our licensees, making them aware of the availability of the spring journal on our website.
Thank you.
I mean, summer.
Any questions? Public comment? Agenda item 19F. And Dr. Horn, could you speak a little on this, because I know you went to a conference recently, correct?
APA thing. Yeah, I attended, was I going to talk about this here? Okay. At APA, American Psychological Association this year, there was a summit on continuing professional development and continuing education. And it was an invited summit. It was psychologists from all over the United States in different areas. So there was a representative, for example, of all the state psychological associations. I think she was president of that group. There were like directors of training from different schools, and so it was like people from all over. And it was really interesting because it was all these groups and all these organizations and associations and every, from training through, let's say, licensure and beyond, taking a look at these issues. And ultimately what the group came up with, it was a one-day thing, and I won't get into all the ways it was all the things that ways it was broken out and everything, but and all the questions we answered. But essentially, it was continuing professional development. It's really clear now that that's the way to go. That CE has its place, but it's only a part of the larger continuing professional development. And so, working with through the APA Continuing Education Office, all these different groups are going to start creating some CE, first of all, some CE courses that are very targeted about different aspects of, I'm going to say psychological practice and all this kind of stuff, like how to, like certain kind of ethical issues or certain kinds of the most common kinds of complaints that are filed against psychologists, and different kinds of things like this, educational that people be doing. And going to also be creating some special issues in journals, psychological journals about continuing professional development, and bringing together the research about this and all like this. So it's going to be a concerted effort. That's kind of where I wanted to go. But through all these different groups that impact all the way from training of psychologists all the way through a psychologist's career, really clear about let's work together to help psychologists continue to remain competent and stuff like that. But, so it was very exciting to see all these groups come together, end up with that kind of thought, that this really is the way to go. Continuing education is important, but it's only a part of this, lifelong process, basically. So,
Dr. Horn, if there's any documents or materials from that meeting that you can perhaps share with Ms. McCochran, it might be helpful in drafting the regulatory package to help with why the change.
Yeah, I'm not sure it would be that helpful, but yeah, I have some stuff. We are commenting on it right now, and that little comment period will be over shortly, and I'll definitely get that to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions? Public comment?
Yeah, just a couple of questions.
Sally Cameron was there.
What?
Sally Cameron.
Yes, I'm aware of the meeting. When you say these groups are working on courses, can you say a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Well, they're actually, this was brought from the VA.
Okay.
The VA has a thing for all their licensees where they send out their sort of like blast continuing education topics for folks to get, but they're absolutely directly related to aspects of practice, writing a professional will, how how long you have to, typically on ethical issues, but.
And they send that to VA psychologists.
Yeah, the VA psychologists get it. They can go through it. They're kind of reminded of it.
So like grand rounds
a little bit.
format.
Yeah.
And then when you said that you're commenting on this, what are you?
We're just commenting on our meeting
We
right now.
the people who
the
were there?
attendees of the meeting. Is this what we decided to do? Is this
So
what
under
our
what,
thinking was?
the thing that I am wondering, under what, under whose auspices is the we? Is this
came-
APACE committee?
It was the APACE office,
Right.
and ASPPB was also involved in that.
Right.
I mean, it was the two groups that basically who had, worked on MoCal and
Okay.
started,
Do you know how broadly, does that have anything to do with the licensing jurisdictions? In other words, will what comes out of that group have anything, will it be passed on to the licensing boards around the country? Do you know?
I don't know that it would any more than anything else that comes out of the APA Continuing
Okay.
Education Office.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What I thought was particularly interesting, and the reason I wanted to present on it was I just felt like California was at the forefront here again. This is what's really coming in now. There's just a lot more information that this is the way to go, and that just made me feel excited about what we're doing about continuing professional development. So.
Thank you. Agenda item 19G, outreach plan for high schools, community colleges, and university systems to increase licensing population. Again, nothing's changed here since our last June board meeting, and we're also waiting for Ms. Burns to return. So we will pick up on this in 2018 when we meet again. Same for agenda item 19H. And agenda item 19I, professional therapy never includes sex. Update, as I understand it, staff is working internally on this. It's the first step, correct? And then after that, you all will work on a draft, and you're going to be working with the other two boards, the medical board and the behavioral health science board, to collectively come up with a brochure, correct? And then after that, it goes to internal staff for review, and then you're going to send it to experts. And then is that at that point that it comes back to the board for review?
After it has a staff review, expert review, it'll then come to the board for review in an updated draft, and then you'll provide input, and then the Department of Consumer Affairs will take the feedback from the three parties, because this is something that's required in the general provisions of the Business and Professions Code, that the department shall produce a brochure that lays out these requirements. So then they will take the input from all three, and then we'll kind of take it from there. And we'll be working with the attorneys from all three programs to make the most sense of those changes with the board input.
Thank you. Ms. Sark, do we have a timeline on that?
The staff is going to be meeting on the 19th from all three of the programs, so that is the first step. The next step will then be recruiting experts from each of the three programs to then have a meeting and provide input to the staff draft update to the brochure. I can just say from our own initial review, we've made several amendments to the brochure, so we are anxious about an update to the brochure.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
And I know there's a process in place, but I had just made a note, and given our conversation yesterday, I hope that we're tapping into that expert reviewer pool of folks. And now, as we're recruiting more people that are interested and people that have actually reviewed cases like this might be the one pool that we pull from, because there might be some firsthand knowledge and information that might help phrase things appropriately.
Great point. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Public comment? And I think I'm just going to get into the habit of asking this, if I may ask for a motion to have the board accept my outreach and committee meeting update.
So moved.
Thank you.
Actually have a question and a comment. I'm
Sure.
sorry. I had to step out to take care of personal matters for a moment. Going back to the communications plan, and I'm sorry if it was discussed, but I had made a note to bring it up. For our objective to increase visibility for the board and the industry it regulates, and we have the tool about increasing visibility of board by conducting board meetings at schools. I don't know if we discussed it. I don't know if it's an issue about travel costs being too exorbitant. I feel like we've gotten away from some of that recently. It's been only one meeting a year, and it's been here the last couple of years. And I know that we had location challenges, I think not location challenges, but travel cost restrictions for state travel. I know in the Los Angeles area and different types of things. I just hope that, I know we met up in Sacramento at a school in the past, and I just hope that I feel like it's a different feel. And we were at Pepperdine one year. We got different types of members in the audience. I think this is such an important objective, and I hope that we would revisit it and do it a little bit more broadly.
I guess I would add that I hope that we revisit the topic in general. I don't know that going to graduate schools, it's been great here at the Wright Institute, but we've gone to graduate programs where we've seen virtually no students. So I think we should just kind of reappraise the whole situation and see if it's a workable solution, or if there's another way that we can reach out to the graduate student and early career psychologist population to bring them into the meetings.
Well, and also, I don't know if we define success by number of people at the meeting. I think it's important for us to be present in those locations. And so I think that we would need to revisit and look in terms of how we would define success or not success. Because at a hotel room and wherever, I don't know if that is us also getting to the same objective as we are with that. So I hear your point.
So are you saying that for us as a board to attend and have our meetings at different schools?
We had meetings at different schools. Like we have it here at Wright Institute. We've
Yeah.
had it at Pepperdine in Los Angeles.
I like that.
We had it at, I forget the campus in Sacramento, Missouri, Alliant. And so I know that there was a lot of discussion at one point. One year we did almost I feel like we were doing different things. I don't know if we've gone any place in San Diego since I've been on the board, but I just feel like just even seeing people in the hallway is a different type of interaction about our role. And as a person who has done presentations at schools as a public member, I think that students, just to be able to touch a board member and know what the board does, I think there's value, even if they're not here in the room, if they're in a class. I think there's opportunity, and I think part of the reason it was written here in the plan was to increase visibility. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And I would ask the Outreach and Education Committee to look at that question as the utility of it. And I would agree with many of the comments that you made, and then maybe bring it back to the board on the next board agenda. Or after the next, I guess, Outreach and Education Committee meeting.
We will see you in 2018.
Okay, then.
Yeah, so I think as part of that is I just wanted to know what was done previously to increase kind of attendees from students, because I have been a student not that long ago, and I don't know if we reach out to schools and let them know personally what our schedule is like, instead of just having it on our board website and expecting them to keep tabs of the schedule.
Well, we tweet, correct? Or are we through our social media outreach?
We do, and we did tweet and mention the Wright Institute, that we were having our meeting here today, and we mentioned the Wright Institute. So people that are following the Wright Institute, as well as our followers, would have known that we were holding our board meeting here today and tomorrow. As much as we can promote that, we certainly try and do that.
And just, even though they're not here, hopefully they will know that how appreciative we were that the students from Palo Alto University were here and were able to participate in the meeting and
Yes.
had interesting things to say. So I think it's an important objective for us to somehow find a way to involve graduate students more in this process.
And Dr. Kasuga, you know, in our CPT package, that is there's an opportunity for people to actually receive credit for that. So I think that having it at the schools, we may have increased participation for a lot of reasons, or increased participation anyway after 2021. But again, just the issue of connecting and being in the location, I think, does say a different kind of story.
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback.
Who are they by? I'm sorry.
I made the motion. Who seconded it?
Dr. Kutsu? Oh, Ms. Craven.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, public comment. I didn't call public comment. I apologize for that.
Well, that's part of the motion, so you
Oh, okay. I just, two things. I want to remind the board that we have a student organization, the California Psychological Association of Graduate Students, CPAGs, and they have a listserv. They also have a Facebook page. If you want to use, and we can help you use that, we need to be reminded that you'd like to put something out about board meetings, and that would be fine. I will just raise again something that we've raised in the past about having meetings at locations that are kind of far from airports. College campuses are not always the most convenient places to be. It does add cost for the public that's attending sometimes if we have to fly in and have to rent a car, for example, as opposed to going to an airport hotel or something. I agree that it's good to reach out to students, and we would like to help you do that any way we can, but also with the balance of just considering the cost that the public incurs in coming to the meetings. So, and we also, if you are asking about college campuses, university campuses, we can, if you need assistance in making contacts there, we have our Division of Education and Training. Our current president is at JFK University. We know a lot of people at a lot of these places and may be able to help you identify some locations, if that would be helpful. Thank you.
KPIC is, you know, an organization of training programs and doctoral programs. So we'd be happy to send something out on our email blasts. We have actual listservs just for all the interns and the postdocs, so we could do that as well. I kind of have a little different position than Dr. Jolanda Crow. I think, at least for KPIC, when we hold our meetings at doctoral institutions and community institutions, we get better showings of the community than when we have had them when they're more closer to the airport. So I think it just makes a difference one way or the other. You know, for KPIC also, it helps because we're not for profit, save a little money too, but actually more people seem to show up, and we also get kind of community presence that we were there. So maybe for the board, that's something to consider as well. For KPIC, if there's any way on the agenda to just suggest a few highlighted points that may be relevant to those in academia or students specifically, then that probably would be a way to kind of market it better to get them interested to come in. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think this was something that came up at our Outreach and Education Committee meeting the last time, was how does the board currently market our meetings? And I think it's something that we as staff kind of grapple with, how to get people excited and energized without just sounding very cold and bureaucratic in announcing that we're having a board meeting on this date and this is the location. So it's something that we can continue to discuss at the Outreach and Education Committee level. And from the staff perspective, we're happy to take any input from the board that you may have. If you know something on the agenda that might grab the attention and it's not something that we feel is as exciting or whatnot to highlight, please bring that to our attention so that can help us do our job better as well.
Thank you. Okay.
I will. Akwebadu?
It's a motion to approve the committee report.
Of course. Bernal?
Aye.
Kasuga? Aye. Erickson?
Aye.
Fu?
Aye.
Horn?
Aye.
Jones?
Aye.
Phillips?
Aye.
Passes.
Very controversial. We're moving on to agenda item number 20, I believe. Agenda item number 20, which is the update on stakeholders meetings on the pathways to licensure. Dr. Horn and Ms. Chung.
Sure.
Hello. So the licensing committee had completed 2 stakeholders meeting. One was conducted in Northern California in Sacramento back in May, and then the other one was held in Los Angeles in August this past month. So in October, we have received good feedback from the stakeholders group, and then in October in our licensing committee meeting, we're going to rectify all the feedback and make a final proposed language and to present it to the full board for review in November. So I'm going to hand over to licensing committee members so that they can share their experience coming from the stakeholder meetings.
Thank you, Ms. Chung. I'd like to start. So, we had these 2 meetings. At the end of them, I'm feeling like this is the way to go. It was, I know it was labor intensive and stuff. It was interesting. Northern California and Southern California were different. We got some different feedback between the 2 groups. I really want to thank all the people who took their time to come to one or the other. A couple of people came to both Northern and Southern California meetings. So that was nice to see too and give their input. We had people from a lot of different communities. CPA was represented in both Northern and Southern California. We had people from education. We had people who were just licensed psychologists who were interested. We had early career psychologists. We had later psychologists. We had psychologists who worked in different capacities, different kind of organizations and stuff. So anyway, I think we really got some useful feedback, some helpful feedback, some things that we really are going to bring back to the licensing committee and think about as we go through these pathways again before we bring it to the board. But that's kind of my sense. I again want to thank everybody. I think everyone. It was just a really helpful process for us to do this, and I really liked getting feedback from our stakeholders before we put anything out there for official comment or anything like that. It was really good in that way. So that's what I have to say.
I would agree that I thought it was a very useful process, and because the quality of the feedback was different between the 2 meetings, it was thought-provoking in different ways. So I think it was a great thing to do and a very good use of resources and time, and I think it makes our licensed population certainly feel that we're being respectful of their input, and so on the whole, I had a very positive feeling about it.
I echo those sentiments, having only been to one of the two prior to the Southern California one. But I did appreciate the participation. I know Dr. Schaefer says as well, and highlighting the pre-doc, post-doc experience was very helpful, and the and how those hours are accrued, particularly if someone's seeking to be supervised by a psychiatrist, and having a robust discussion there. And so that, I think, is a collaborative manner, and interested in seeing how this moves forward.
I also wanted to recognize that there were some of the chapters of the California Psychological Association that were there as well, some county chapters that had representation, and their input was very much appreciated as well.
Sorry. I'm just okay. Any other discussion from the board?
In fact, yes. No, I'm glad to hear that was the feedback. I know that was part of the plan to do it. I will say just two observations, since I did not attend any of them. And it just is a great reminder as we think about outreach and education in general, too.
Mm-hmm.
As I read this stakeholder, I remember, but right after the first one, we said we were a little unsure about participation. There wasn't as many as we thought there would be. And I know that the way the second letter was crafted really was intriguing to come. The only critique I would have, or suggestion for future types of efforts like this, consumers and the public were missed off of this. Now, again, they may not be interested, but as I look at the third paragraph or the fourth paragraph, as if you're a leader or expert in the field, and it's not in the board book, it's the letter that was mailed because I'm on the list. I feel like we have to always remember stakeholders include the public, they include consumers, and quite frankly, include students in this case too. And so when we call out certain things only, where we would assume that yes, a licensee would be the most vocal and most interested in this topic, I don't want us to ever forget that our stakeholders are a little bit broader, and I think that we should be a little bit more intentional about how we call out everybody, even if they're not going to come.
Perhaps staff would like to address who was invited to these events.
Definitely. So on our stakeholder invite list that we sent a mass invitation out, we did include consumer groups such as NAMI. NAMI, we sent out invitation not to just their main branch, or we sent out to all of the branch on the West Coast that we could find on the website.
Basically each county.
Yeah, definitely.
Different chapters.
Yeah, different chapters. We did send out to consumer groups such as WEAF also. And so we try to be inclusive because we're aware that, okay, maybe they have some significant input that we're not seeing from the lens as a board.
And I appreciate that, Ms. Chung. And I know
Definitely.
that we've been really working on trying to increase our database. I'm referring to the tone of the letter. The letter does not call them out. And it says, quote, as a leader and or expert within the psychology profession, a provider of services, an applicant and or supervisor. Consumers are not identified. So I'm glad to hear that we are really, increasing our database. I just feel like we have to be concerned about how the tone in which we invite people. Because if I was on that list and I wasn't, NAMI might not come. I mean, that's not who you want to come to the event. So I just offer that up as just for us to be thoughtful when we're doing this, because when we think about stakeholders, we need to include everyone in the tip.
Definitely. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, my thing was on.
I did, not related to those comments, but to the meeting, I think having the facilitator there to have those discussions, because for those who weren't able to attend, having to at least mention that there was a facilitator there to guide the discussion that was a bit removed from the weeds of the process, and having that facilitator there weigh in the different thoughts and opinions and suggestions, I did think provided an opportunity for folks to feel, who did attend, to feel comfortable speaking up. And there were times the facilitator did reach out, noticing some quieter tables to get their opinions and draw them out. And I thought that was really important, because sometimes folks are naturally more vocal and do take up more vocal space. And the facilitator having that opportunity to also encourage those who are more reflective and deliberative, and may not necessarily share that from the outgo. To draw out those comments, I found really helpful as well, and so would encourage future use of the facilitators if we're doing these stakeholder meetings, in addition to making sure that consumers are more explicitly welcomed in that environment.
Yeah, and
Obviously, transparency and involvement of our stakeholders group is an ongoing process, but I think this was a really great first pass at it, and there's probably things we can do to improve that as time goes on. But I think the spirit of it is absolutely essential, and I'm so glad that we made the effort.
And I just to clarify, the licensing committee members and staff who were there were really there to clarify things. If, you know, here was our thinking on this, this is why we're asking this, all that kind of stuff. So we didn't, we absolutely didn't.
Dr. Hearn, who was the facilitator? Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask.
They were from Solid? Yeah. Nothing further on this. I don't have to move anything or anything, do I? Yeah. Okay.
I don't want to cut you off. Behind tab number 21, we give the board meeting event calendar. I think the only change here is that the Outreach and Education Committee meeting that was scheduled for December 7th, 2017 has been put over. And we're in the process at this point of scheduling the meetings for next year internal to the board to determine people's availability to attend particular meetings. I would encourage all board members who have not yet responded to the emails requesting their availability to please do so as early as possible. We'd like to get that stuff all sorted out, and the longer we wait, the more likely it is that we'll get a whole bunch of meetings stuck together in a month, and we know what that feels like. Right, so we really need to have rapid response from the remaining board members in terms of getting this availability information.
As soon as we have all the responses from the board members, we will send those dates out to the board as soon as we get that. So we will, as soon as you guys respond, we have all responses. That's what we will move forward. We'll get it posted on the website, and that way people can start planning that in advance.
And perhaps, I don't know if this has been done already, perhaps we could send out emails to board members that have not responded to particular ones. Maybe even just a blanket one to people that haven't responded with them on the BCC, so we're not calling anybody out. The purpose here is not to shame anybody, but rather to get some responses. And if you go to the second page behind tab number 21, that shows some of the proposed board committee meeting dates and committee meeting dates, I said. The other thing that I would mention here, since we're on the subject of committees, is that we do have our new board member, Dr. Cheryl Kasuga. Welcome, Dr. Kasuga, again. Absolutely, great to have you here. And Dr. Kasuga will be joining the Policy and Advocacy Committee. And we very much look forward to her participation there. And they're finally going to have a full complement of folks. We're back to 3 members on that committee, so we're headed in the right direction. There's obviously still one licensed member that has yet to be appointed to the board, and we do keep in touch with the governor's office to ensure that moves through and forward in the most expeditious way that's possible for them. But we do try to provide them additional information and to also make them conscious of the fact that we are looking for that additional appointment so we can be at full force. Okay, any comments on the president's report? Any public comment? I think that's the end of the agenda. Dr. Schaefer, did you have somebody have public comment?
I just want to offer to the board, I know we often just want to remind the board when you're scheduling, and I don't see any conflicts right now, but we have 2 major events a year. One is our Leadership and Advocacy Conference and our Lobby Day, which will be March 19th and 20th. in Sacramento. And our annual convention, which is in La Jolla, will be April 26th through the 29th. I just always like to let the board know that, so you have that on the calendar. I don't see that there's any conflict right now, but just in case.
And we do
start
try to
looking
keep
for
track of those
alternative
dates
dates.
as well as, I think, the LA
Yeah.
County Psychological
Sure,
Association
then,
Convention. and-
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and APA, yeah. So, but very much appreciated. Thank you very much, Dr. Linda Crow. APA. It was conflicting with APA. Okay.
Just, Dr. Schaefer.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Schaefer.
I was waiting for Dr. Linda Crow. Just a quick question. I'm wondering if the board is considering taking up the issue of having readiness for licensure occur at the conferment of one's degree, meaning that all your training hours for licensure would be counted up prior to the point of the degree being conferred. I know there's discussion of that at APA, or there has been in the past, and some other states have looked at the conferment of the degree as the final point at which one could sit for licensure, and just wondering if that's being taken up as an agenda item for the
It
future.
would probably be an agenda item for the licensing committee first, to the extent that they want to take it up. So I know that they have a very full agenda.
I would advocate for it. I think anything that the board can do to help doctoral level students move forward with the potential to be licensed in a more reasonable fashion. When we look at 2 to 3 practica experiences over a 2 to 3 year span, then a full year or 2 half-year trainings for a predoctoral internship, if there's a way to have all those years of practice count towards their 3,000 hours, as opposed to putting a burden that 1,500 hours has to be collected postdoctorally in a situation where it's much more difficult for people to get postdoctoral training, and to think about what has been, I think, reported as an idea from APA originally. I think that came from APA. And I think there are some states that have taken this up.
I think there's 17 states that have taken it up.
Yes, and since California's has been in the past on certain issues a bellwether state and progressive on considering new directions, maybe this is something the board would be willing through the licensing committee to consider. Thank you.
Mhm. Did you want to say something, Dr. Horn?
I think it's something, I think we ought to put it on the licensing committee
Okay,
agenda.
great. We haven't actually gotten to agenda item number 22, although I think we got mixed into it. So maybe we could move to agenda item number 22, which is recommendations for agenda items for future board meetings. Again, remember that we cannot comment on these suggestions other than to consider whether we want to include them in agendas.
The item I'd like to put on the agenda, possibly for November, would be the process for regulatory, because we will not have a policy and advocacy meeting, but we might have 2 packages to share with the public, and I think that would be great, and it would be fantastic to have a visual of a diagram. Mr. Glassbeagle talked about it today, but to be a part of board packaging would be fantastic.
We can do a presentation on the regulatory process at the November meeting. And then we'll, based on discussion today, we'll go ahead and plan to have the legislative process overview at the February meeting.
Any other suggestions for agenda items?
Wasn't there something that we talked about yesterday that we wanted to put on future agenda, a future agenda? I wrote it down but can't seem to find it. So I might have written it in there.
Was it the enforcement stuff?
Yes, it was something about it. Was it about the?
We are adding the draft expert reviewer criteria to the
Yeah,
enforcement
yeah,
committee.
okay.
And then once the committee reviews that, it'll come back to the board for review and consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Hearing no further comment, I am happy to report we are adjourned.